welcome to the workshop here. You know, I'm excited to get back in front of you guys. We're having trouble with the video, so I apologize for that, but actually it's probably a break for you guys. The slides are far better, far more entertaining than my face, I'm sure. So anyway, like I said, it's been a couple of years since we've done these body signal workshops, and I'm excited to kind of start bringing those back in. You know, you guys may or may not have heard we've had this pandemic thing going on, so we haven't been able to get together as much. But as we kind of get into 2022, I think that's going to, you know, some of those things are going to start easing, and we can start doing more of these things. And this workshop, you know, what I wanted to do was kind of start to get the foundation. I wanted to get this information out for you guys for a couple of reasons. Now, I was wanting to do it a couple of weeks ago, but because of scheduling issues, it kind of got pushed back. But this information is still very relevant, even though we're, you know, maybe a few weeks past the holidays at this point. Because I do think as we start to come out of the COVID stress, we're going to start to see a lot of these same symptoms, and we kind of already are in the office a bit, but I think it's going to be this more prolonged situation. And I want to have this presentation in our library for us as we, you know, because everybody's going to kind of hit this point maybe a little bit different as they come out of their COVID bubble, if you will, and kind of get past some of this stress that we've all been under for a number of years. So, you know, one of the things I always start my classes out with is to remind everybody that, you know, if you're going to, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining us. But second of all, if you are going to join us, I want to remind you that, you know, you're going to get out of tonight's class what you put into it. The analogy I always use is like the two guys at the gym. One guy goes to the gym and, you know, has a spreadsheet and really checking things off, writing down how much he's doing. He's going from machine to machine and really has a plan in place to get the most out of his time. And he's there, you know, maybe 45 minutes or so and gets a really good workout. Another guy goes to the gym and he just kind of meanders around, goes from machine to machine, does a couple of reps, gets a drink from the fountain, you know, sees somebody that makes eye contact with him and talks to them for 20 minutes or so, and before long the guy's there for an hour and a half and he's only done like 2 exercises. But at the end of the day, which one got far more out of their gym experience? Well, of course, the one that was focused and intent on actually doing something at the gym. Well, it's the same thing with tonight's workshop, right? If you're going to put in the time, you know, try to focus, try to get something from it. You know, I've been to a lot of workshops and I've learned beyond a shadow of a doubt that the ones that I pay attention to and the ones I'm excited about are the ones that I get the most from. And the ones that I'm not so excited about and I don't think I'm going to learn anything, guess what? I don't tend to learn anything. So, you know, come into this with a positive attitude, come into it focused, and you're just, you know, it's going to be a much better use of your time and you're going to get far more out of it. Now, one of the reasons I do these workshops, and there's a lot of different reasons, but one of the reasons is because I know we're in a health crisis. We've been in a health crisis for many decades already, and it's just been exacerbated by what we've gone through with the pandemic. And we're going to be in an even worse situation, unfortunately. So the good news is the pandemic will come to an end. The bad news is we have not addressed any of the health problems that we still have in this country. In fact, they've gotten worse because we're in the health crisis, and we've been in one for a really, really long time. Now, tonight's class, like I said, we're really going to focus on the holiday recovery side of things, or the post-holiday burnout situation. You know, one of the slides that kind of got all of this started a while back for me was this slide on number of cardiac deaths that occur every day throughout a given year. Now, this is an older slide, but the information is still relevant. I've been looking for an updated one. I haven't been able to find one, but this is still the case even to this day. You know, one of the things that happens around Christmas time and around New Year's is we see this great big spike in the number of cardiac deaths. And, you know, one of the questions I have for you guys is, why do we see that? Is it because, you know, they close the hospitals down for the holidays, or we run out of medication, or, you know, what's going on? Why do we see that? Well, of course, it's because of stress, right? And there's certainly a lot of other factors that go into it, but generally speaking, it's because of the stress. Now, one of the things that also happens is as we kind of go through this high stress period, we start to come out the other side and we actually start to tank our cortisol levels, right? And so this is the time that we're in right now. This is when everybody typically gets sick in a given year. And guess what's going on? Everybody's getting sick right now with Omicron, right? It's almost like clockwork. Somebody, you know, we really could have predicted that this was almost going to occur. Maybe not the Omicron variant, but this time of the year, everybody gets sick sick anyway. And it's because we have this big high spike in cortisol leading up to the holidays, pushing to get through, and then our body's kind of let down. We reassess, and then all of a sudden we're fighting off all the colds and flus and things. But not only are we under more stress, and one of the things we're going to talk a lot about tonight is we're under a lot more unnatural stress. And stress comes at us in a variety of ways, not just our thoughts, but also with toxins. We're eating cruddy during the holidays, and traumas and micro traumas, which we're going to spend a lot of time on towards the end of the class. We've been in this health crisis, like I said, and we're going to continue in this health crisis. One of the new stats or slides that came out is actually where they were comparing health statistics of a society and of a country, and they were looking at the top 11 countries in the world as far as economics. In the United States, we spend more than twice as much as any other country in the world on healthcare. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on with that. Unfortunately, most of what we spend our money on is not health care, it's sickness care. And we have this really poor definition of health. I think we're in a health crisis for three primary reasons, and we'll talk about all three tonight. But the first primary reason that we're in a health crisis is we have a very poor definition of health. We don't know what health is. How are we supposed to get healthy if we can't even define it, right? And so anyway, this slide is one of the new ones that just came out in November of 2021, where they were comparing the health statistics. And I found this slide very entertaining because not only are we last on the list of the top 11 countries, but when you look at our rating, it's just it plummets, right? We are totally so far down in the basement that it's not even close to being funny. And it's been this way for years, guys. We rank number 37 in the world in World Health Statistics. 45th in the world. So, just for fun, go out and try to name 30 other countries and see how well you do. And like I said, we spend twice as much as any other country. Not because our stuff is necessarily twice as expensive, but in some ways it is. But most of what we spend our money on is not health care. It's on sickness care. It's on crisis care. It's on covering up the symptoms that we don't really like, right? And this just is not acceptable, and it's a battle that I've been trying to fight for years. Of we really have to change this paradigm, and the only way I know to change it is through my patients, one patient at a time, one lecture at a time, right? So welcome to being part of my crusade. So what are we talking about tonight? Well, tonight our primary focus is going to be on the post-holiday hangover symptoms. It's not that different from most hangovers, right? The symptoms that we get post-holidays: exhaustion. We get our colds and flus, right? Or COVID or Omicron this year, right? We get our headaches. We get digestive disruption. We get some weight gain. We get irritable, we get pain, we get anxiety, we get depressed. This is our body trying to speak to us. Our body is talking to us all the time. Unfortunately, in our society, we've been taught to ignore our body, or if we don't like what our body's trying to tell us, to try to cover it up, right? To shut it off and to mute it with medication of some kind, because rather than trying to figure out what is our body trying to tell us and try to figure out what we should do about it, our normal response in our society is figure out how to shut our body up. Our body is incredibly smart, and we're going to talk more about that. And it talks to us. We just have to listen. And we have to recognize that our body is trying to tell us to do something different. But instead, in our society, we lead up to the holidays, and what do we hear? Keep pushing, take medication to cover it up, right? Ignore the symptoms, suck it up. Hey, this is the new normal, right? No, this is not okay. This is our body trying to tell us something. And the way that the body speaks is sometimes with symptoms. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't even give us symptoms, right? It just gives us a heart attack. That's a terrible first symptom to have. But a lot of times there's some lead up to these kinds of things. But what are symptoms really? Well, symptoms are our body talking to us, first of all. It's telling us we need to do something different. And it's probably not take more Tylenol. I've yet to see a case of Tylenol deficiency. But it's like I said, it's a signal. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's just a little subtle hint that something underneath the surface is going wrong. A lot of times what's going wrong is, hormone disruption, chemical imbalances, physical imbalances, emotional imbalances, and it eventually starts to manifest itself just like an iceberg with a little bit that's sticking up above the surface. And this is that body signal. It's that symptom a lot of times that we're kind of looking for to tell us, hey, you know what, we need to start thinking about what we're doing and what we can do a little bit differently moving forward. One of the things I spend a lot of time in these classes are introducing you guys, and you guys have seen this slide multiple times because I like using it, and it's the wellness paradigm, or the health skill, if you will. And so what I want you guys to do is just take a second, kind of look through this. On the far left side of it is disability and symptoms, and then there's some signs, and as we keep moving up, there's awareness and education and growth. And just for being here in this class, you guys are moving yourself in a healthier direction, right? You're getting some awareness, maybe hopefully some education, I don't know. But at least some awareness. And then if you take the information, so information is not power, right? It's the application of the information that is actually powerful. And if you take some of the information I shared tonight and start to implement it, you start moving in a healthier direction. So congratulations, guys, first of all. But what I want you to do for just a moment, though, is to just kind of take a little bit of an inventory of yourself, right? Do a self-check. Where do you feel like you are on this continuum? And I want you to ask yourself, which direction do you feel like you've been heading, especially, recently? And how fast are you moving in that direction? Now that you kind of know those three parameters, where you're at, which direction you're going, and how fast you're moving, you can now figure out that you have another component. You have some momentum. And hopefully that momentum is going to move you in a positive direction. But if you have momentum moving in the other direction, hey, it's time to kind of, take an assessment and ask yourself, is this really the direction I want to keep going? And do I want to keep accelerating in that direction? Once momentum gets going, it can be hard to stop it sometimes, right? So, if you get nothing else out of this class, but maybe a little bit of an awareness or awakening to, hey, I need to maybe start paying attention here a little bit. Hey, then my job was successful tonight. But what I really want to do is start to teach you guys how to speak this foreign language for a lot of you, and it's body. How to speak body, right? Like I said, our body talks to us. We just need to know. Well, first of all, we need to stop and listen, and then we need to understand what it's saying, and then we need to figure out what to do about it. When we make better decisions, we tend to make better choices, right? Which ultimately gets to better behaviors. One of the things that's very difficult for me is I can tell you what to do, and the truth is most patients know what to do, so you really don't need me telling you what to do or what not to do, right? Most of you guys already know that. The reason I teach this class, like I said, is to get down to that deeper level, to try to change some of your beliefs, so that I can change your behavior, so that I can change your outcomes, right? Your belief system is what organizes your behaviors and your choices, which leads to your outcomes and your results. And that gets us to kind of my second premise as to why we're in a health crisis. Remember, number one is we have this very poor definition of health. What we define as health is really sickness, or lack of sickness. It's always funny to me, somebody can be healthy one day and then catch a cold, and then all of a sudden they're sick the next, and maybe they fight it for 2 or 3 days, and then they get better, right? And so then they're healthy again. That's not how I look at health. I think you're either healthy, you can be healthy and do sick, both, right? Like, you can have symptoms and still be healthy. You can also not have any symptoms at all and be completely unhealthy. So one of the things that we really have to do is understand that health is really a lifestyle. It's not a feeling, right? So that's the first thing I want you to get from tonight's class. But the second reason that I think we're in a health crisis is we just don't take personal responsibility, right? Hey, does my insurance cover this? That's one of the questions that often gets asked. Or hey, do I have to do anything, or can somebody do this for me, or can I just take a pill for this, right? We tend to want to try to take the easy way out, and I get that. I'm king at trying to get out as much work as I can, but it really does come down to personal responsibility. And like I said, there are 3 big reasons that we're in this health crisis. So number 1, poor definition of health. Number 2, personal responsibility. Again, not you guys. You guys are taking responsibility. You're the ones listening to this class. And again, the ones that really need to hear this information are not going to tune in, unfortunately, unless you guys invite them or bring them to our next workshop. So hopefully you guys do that. Hopefully we get to do an in-person workshop next time. And we'll get to the 3rd reason that we're in this health crisis later, right? So I want to introduce you to a new premise, or at least my premise that I tend to work from. The premise that I believe in is that health is normal. Our bodies are designed to be healthy. They're hardwired to be healthy. Our bodies crave health. Our body is also super smart. Our body doesn't make mistakes. I think one of the false beliefs that get a lot of people in a lot of trouble is that they think that their body made a mistake or makes mistakes. The truth is, our body is so smart; it does the best that it absolutely can, given what's available to it. Right? It tries to make the best decisions it can. The 3rd premise is that our nervous system is our master system. It's basically what controls everything in our body. It controls how we interpret our environment and how we're going to respond to it. Everything happens through that nervous system. So if our nervous system is happy, we're going to have a happy body, right? Pretty simple. But if our nervous system is distorted or confused, we're going to end up with a confused response to the situation. Our spine is our suit of armor. We'll talk more about that. And modern life is unnaturally stressful. We're going to talk more about this as we go. Not only do we live in a time of more stress, but we live in a time of more unnatural stress. And this unnatural stress is so deadly, and it's so deadly to our health, as a society. And I wish I could spend more time on this tonight. In a lot of our other workshops, we get to dive more into the unnatural part of the stress. But I'm just going to kind of introduce that concept tonight. I'm not going to be able to spend as much time on it as I wish I could. So again, what are the sources of our stress, right? Well, really, they kind of boil down to 3 main categories, or 3 T's, as we call them. Our thoughts, our toxins, and traumas, right? And so, obviously, the holiday effect, there is a lot of stress trying to get ready for the holidays, trying to get into the holidays, trying to deal with family during the holidays sometimes. To be honest, this is one of the more stressful holiday seasons, ever. Just trying to get everything ready, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to, be doing this year with, the kids, and trying to take care of everything. And, it was an extremely stressful holiday season. And so I could relate, to be honest with you, to most of these holiday hangover symptoms that we went through. I was like, yep, this is how it is. So what causes the thought stress on us? Well, it comes from a lot of different ways and a lot of different reasons, right? But primarily, whether you know it or not, your body is an amazing economist. It's dealing with limited resources, and it's trying to figure out how to divvy out these limited resources. Our limited resources are our time, our energy, our focus, and our money, right? Well, guess what? The holidays hit. They hit all those. We have no time during the holidays. Our energy levels suck because we're trying to do too many things. We're trying to bounce around and trying to remember everything, so our focus stinks. And of course, it hits the pocketbook because we're buying gifts and spending money on things that we probably shouldn't be spending money on anyway, because the stuff really isn't all that important, right? But it hits all of our resources all at once, and so it becomes a very stressful event. And again, not only is it a stressful time, but it's an unnatural stress. Kind of think about the old, kind of the old times, if you will. Our primary focus was on attaining food, right? whether that be berries from the field or a wild buffalo out in the prairie. But the focus that we had was on securing that food source. And how much energy was it going to take to go get that food, right? Like, so if the berries were at the top of the mountain, is it going to be advantageous to climb up this really high mountain, potentially dangerous situations, to get those berries? Was there enough calories from that? And those were the things that was our monetary resources at the time, right? Was it good to spend that to go do that? Well, today we don't spend a lot of energy attaining energy, right? We spend a lot of energy sedentary. We spend our energy stressing about going to these events, or spending our money on these gifts and what have you. And we do it in this so unnatural way. We're not necessarily moving with our stress, we're just sedentary with our stress, and that creates a whole nother paradigm of issues that we'll talk a little bit about. We won't get into quite as much as I would normally like, but just understand that we're dealing with limited resources, and we're doing it so unnaturally from the way that we are designed to deal with it. And it has impacts on our physiology, it has impacts on our hormone regulation, and so it leads into this stress response. So our normal stress response, so when we're under stress, we are designed to be under stress for temporary periods of time. For instance, the analogy of a tiger jumping out in the forest, right? You see the tiger, you either fight it, you run from it, or you freeze and get eaten, which is not a great strategy, but it's one of the strategies that our bodies utilize. But it's this fight or flight response. Now, the fight or flight response is really good in that acute stress environment. It's our adaptive physiology. What I like to say is that it saves our lives in the short term, but it shortens our lives in the long term, right? So our adaptive physiology to stress is that our blood pressure rises. It elevates. We need to get oxygen out to our muscles so that we can either run or fight, right? Our heart rate goes up. Again, same thing. We got to get oxygen out to our tissues. Our muscle tone tightens up, squeezes up. Guess what? That's great for fighting or running. It's not so great when you're sitting at a computer with that muscle tone tightening up, right? Our digestion gets upset. We actually stop digesting and absorbing nutrients. We don't really need, calcium for strong bones when we're getting ready to fight a tiger, right? Whatever our bones are, or what our bones are at that moment. We don't need to worry about our bone health 10 years from now in that moment, right? And so we stop absorbing some of our nutrients. What we need is energy. So we absorb our calories really, really well because we need to be able to fight this tiger or run away from it. But we don't really necessarily need the nutrients to be healthy in that moment. It decreases our serotonin level. It does this for a variety of reasons, but who cares if you're depressed, right? Our sensory system is upregulated. We need to be aware of what's going on everywhere around us. What's our outs? What's the tree we can climb? What's this tiger's weak spot? Are there more tigers? So that's it's a good thing to have in that acute stress environment. Our fear and anxiety goes up. None of us have been experiencing this over the last couple of years, right? Just turn on the news. My advice to you is do a news fast. It's a good time to do a fast, right? Get that stuff away from you. Most of you guys have been so glued into the news for the last couple of years. Your fear and anxiety levels are so stinking high, and you're putting yourself into this stress response every time you turn it on. So just stop for a while. Our immune response goes down. Again, who cares if you can fight off that cancer cell that's going to get you 10 years from now? You need to fight that tiger right now. Insulin sensitivity goes up. Our blood sugar goes way up. Our good cholesterol goes down. Our bad cholesterol goes up. Our clotting factors go up. We talked about heart attacks, right? This is one of the reasons that we see so many heart attacks during those stressful times of the holidays for a lot of people. And it's, our sex drive goes down. Again, you don't need to reproduce while you're running away from a tiger, right? And so this is, like I said, this physiology that's been occurring. And like I said, I think, unfortunately, we've spent the last 2.5 years really revving this part of our system up. And we're getting ready to come out of it, like I said, there's the good news. The bad news is we're getting ready to head into this post-holiday hangover, and it's going to trickle along. It's going to come in different phases for different people at different points, and that's one of the reasons I want to get this information out and get it into our library, so that, you know, as I start seeing this in patients, or maybe recognize it with some patients, I can say, hey, you know what, let's go check out this, go re-watch. You know, you might be watching it now, I might be telling you in a month or two, hey, go re-watch this, because I think you're, you know, you're starting to get some of this holiday hangover stuff, but post-COVID hangover, right? Because it is coming. So again, just a reminder of this slide that I showed you earlier with those spikes that occur right around the holidays. Again, if you look back at that physiology that we were just talking about, increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, increased clotting factors, all this stuff, this is why we end up with it. So as we kind of start to shift a little bit into some of the do's and don'ts, right? You know, I want you always to kind of think about it like a stoplight. There's some things that you need to stop doing, some things that you may hear that you may need to slow down from doing, and then there's some that, so hopefully a couple of things that you're going to start doing after you get done listening to this. So as we, like I said, as we kind of transition here a little bit, make a note of, you know, some of the things that you maybe hear that fit which category for you, as we start looking into this. So as we start with our first T, our thoughts, you know, how do we think for recovery? How do we recover from the holidays? Well, you know, one of the things that is a saying around, it's been around our house, it's all over my walls right now, it's I choose, right? So, you know, the truth is, we have a big responsibility for choosing our attitude, right? You know, we can't always choose our situation. Sometimes our situation just flat stinks, right? But we can choose our attitude, and how we're going to attempt to deal with whatever situation we're going to have. Again, it's kind of like I talked about leading into the class tonight. You can either come into the class with a, you know, I'm not going to get anything out of this, waste of time attitude, and guess what? That's probably what you're going to get. Or you can come into it, hey, I'm going to learn something, I'm going to grab something from this. I think there might be something in here for me. And guess what? That's probably what you're going to get as well. So, you know, our perspective really does dictate our reality, right? So how we view things is how we see the world. I mean, that's philosophical, but it's pretty simple too, right? The other thing we can, you know, do to kind of think through our recovery is to choose, you know, to connect with people, to accept where we are with things, accept people the way that they are, respect them. You know, we are hardwired to have connection, and that's one of the great things about the holidays. But you have to choose your attitude first, I think, in a lot of ways, right? As we go into it, and then also understand that there's an energy exchange that takes place when we're dealing with you know, connection and relationships, and, you know, really understanding, you know, is this a good energy exchange for me, or is this draining, right? And sometimes the most loving thing you can say, especially for yourself, is no. You know, do I have the energy? You know, is this costing me energy or giving me energy? And sometimes, like I said, the answer is no. So, and then unconditional love, right? You know, we can choose unconditional love. You know, it doesn't mean that we give somebody unconditional approval for bad behavior, right? But we can choose to love people and choose that higher level of you know, being. And then, of course, grace, you know, God's economy, right? Forgiveness and love, you know, even when they don't deserve it, and we don't sometimes either, because we're going to need that same grace at some point, right? So those are, you know, some of my tips. I stole this from, you know, one of the other slides kind of leading into the holidays, but I think it's also good for us to think through these things as we kind of think about how we're going to recover from the holidays. You know, sleep is one of the big things that happens. You know, stress disrupts so many things. It disrupts our hormones, and the hormones dysregulate our sleep, and then we get, you know, further hormone disruption, and you know, and a lot of times we just keep running this race, and we're running on empty because we're not recharging. And so one of the things sometimes that we really just need to do is just stop and sleep, get some rest. You know, one of the things I'm going to say is really, you know, try to, as you, again, kind of come out of the holidays. We're a few weeks out at this point, but get yourself back in a good rhythm of going to bed at a decent time and waking up at the same time each day. And get that rhythm set, and keep it set. Early to bed, early to rise is one of the big things, right? Maybe it's time to do an e-fast. I kind of talked a little bit about this with the news, but maybe it's time to turn off all the other electronics as well. Turning that phone off at nighttime, not sitting there scrolling through until you've wasted an hour and a half and messed up your sleep schedule even more, and messed up your melatonin release, and your pineal glands going all crazy because you've been looking at blue light. These little things do add up. It's okay to take a nap. Our bodies are actually physiologically designed to take a little nap in the afternoon. But usually we're so busy and we got so much to do, we got so much stress, we can't just stop and rest for a few minutes. I know the guys always love my workshops because I say, hey, take a nap. And if that's the one thing you implement, hey, you know what? At least we started somewhere, right? Again, don't overcommit. No can be a loving answer at times. And then check your expectations. What are you capable of doing? How much can you actually get done? Again, recognize we all have limited resources, right? So source of stress number 2, the holidays hit this area really hard. It's the toxins, right? There's always plenty of really good sweet food that is not good for us. So how do we eat for recovery? Well, one of the things I'm going to say is don't go hungry. That just puts you back into a stress mode. Yes, I want you to eat, but I want you to eat healthy. The battle is won at the register, not at the pantry or the refrigerator at 2 a.m., right? And hopefully you're not waking at 2 a.m. because you got yourself on a better sleep schedule. But anyway, don't drink your calories. That's post-holiday. That's and especially COVID. The alcohol sales have been going through the roof for a while now. And unfortunately, this is one of the side effects to being in fear and anxiety, and people, wanting to check out, is that they've been drinking way too many of their calories. Avoid the white stuff, so the white breads, the white flours, the white sugar. One of my good buddies that I stay in contact with, he's a crazy Canadian, but and he's native. He's got a real passion for the indigenous people, right? And so he said it. The indigenous people had good lives until white showed up. White man with the white flour and the white sugar, and just killed us off. So anyway, just stay away from the white stuff, and then fill yourself with the healthy foods. Like I said, I don't want you going hungry, and you shouldn't go hungry, but it needs to be healthy foods. That means unlimited veggies, lean cuts of natural meats and fish, and healthy eggs, some fruits and nuts and seed. And again, I've hit this pretty hard already, but stay away from the refined carbs and the sugars. That's pretty much the holiday diet, though, right? Everybody brings in their holiday treats. Get that gone. Break that situation. Some things that I just generally recommend across the board for most people is omega fats. It's like dousing the cells with a little bit of anti-inflammatory component, and we'll do a class on inflammation at some point where we get down to the chemistry and understand where the omega fats come into this, but not tonight. D3, especially most of you guys live in Kansas. We just don't get enough sunlight this time of year. Our vitamin D levels plummet. Not a good opportunity to get sick when our vitamin D levels are low. Our body can't regulate it as well, so you tack on lowered immune response with no vitamin D, and it's a catastrophe waiting to happen. And then because you've messed up your GI system during the holidays, and just in general, standard American diet, standard S, American A, diet D, it's just a sad diet. That's where your probiotics come in. And then most people agree that we just don't get enough magnesium in our diet as well. So those are kind of my 4 basics that I just tend to recommend across the board, whether it's recovery supplementation or not. That's just kind of good foundation. This is always a good time of the year to consider doing a detox, to kind of get things jump started, get that metabolism jump started, get some of those toxins out of the system, and give the body a chance to kind of clean up a little bit from some of our previous sins over the holidays. And then the last T that we're going to talk about tonight are traumas. And primarily we're talking about physical traumas. And these traumas come in two flavors, if you will. We have our macro traumas. These are the ones most people recognize. These are the slips and falls and accidents and car accidents and sports injuries. The things that tend to kind of happen suddenly and that we get injured from. Remember, our spine is a suit of armor, right? And our vertebrae act like a protective mechanism, but it has this delicate issue where it has to protect the spinal cord. But we also need to be mobile, right? And we need to be able to move around. And so sometimes that ability to move and to protect creates an issue. And it creates what's called a subluxation. It's a fancy chiropractic word. It means less light, so it's less health. So basically what happens when we have these traumas is that we can become, in a simple term, we become misaligned. Now, this is, I'm taking some leniency with that, but in general, it's easy to understand. A vertebrae gets misaligned. The body's response to that is that often as it becomes misaligned, is it damages the soft tissue, because the soft tissue is designed to keep it aligned, right? So if it didn't keep it aligned, something was not working well. And then that leads to tissue damage, which leads to inflammation, which leads to the body's response to inflammation, which is to tighten things up. As it tightens things up, it irritates the nerves. As it irritates the nerves and we tighten up, we also lose what's called imbibition. So our joints are designed to move. They do not have a blood supply inside of the joint. If they did, every time you moved, you'd break a blood vessel, right? So as we move, it pumps nutrients into the joints and pumps the waste products out. Well, as we tighten up and we spasm up, we lose that movement, right? And so we stop feeding those joints, and those joints become fixated, and they get adhesions, and they get scar tissue. And over time, if we continue to stop feeding the joint and we get these fixations, this is what we see on x-rays as arthritis, right? And also, one of the things that's occurring simultaneously with all this stuff going on is that it's a stressor to the body, and so we end up with elevated stress hormones. We end up with elevated inflammation, not only because of the tissue damage, but because of the neurological effects, downstream effects that are all occurring. And all happening all at the same time. So we end up, back in this same stress response that we already talked about. This time, not necessarily because of, thought traumas that we were talking about earlier, but this time because of the physical traumas that are occurring in our life. One of my fun patients this past week or so has been a nurse, just a real active lady, real neat lady. But she came into the office, had high blood pressure, had a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain, was taking a lot of medication, was starting to get paresthesias, and after a few weeks of care, the paresthesias are improving, the blood pressure, she's off the blood pressure medication, she's off all the pain medication, and this happened in just a couple of weeks. But it's always a reminder to me, and the cool thing is I get to hear these stories all the time, right? But sometimes I forget there's so many people out there that don't know about. She didn't know that much about her son. Drug her in. She didn't want to go to a chiropractor, and now she's singing our praises, right? And these are the stories, like I said, I get to hear all the time. But unfortunately, there are still hundreds, and most of the population are not seeing a chiropractor regularly, and they're going down this pathway of more medication, more symptoms, without ever addressing the underlying issue. And in her case, a lot of it was just the spinal deconditioning that was taking place with her. And as we got that going, the rest of her body started doing well again. It's funny how that works. If we take care of the underlying issue, things actually do improve. So like I said, this is what in chiropractic what we call the subluxation. It causes nerve irritation and interference, and our body interprets our environment through the nervous system. So if there's interference in it, it can interpret our environment correctly, both our internal environment and our external environment, and it makes bad choices because it's dealing with the information that it's given. It just hasn't been given all the information, and so it has to guess at things, and usually it's amazingly good at guessing, but that's not really sustainable. Eventually it's going to start to have to guess, or it's going to guess incorrectly, and we're going to end up with adaptive physiology, which we just talked about with the stress response, right? So the other form of stress, we talked a little bit about the car accidents and the falls and things, but those do happen, but the most common reason for subluxation is micro traumas. So little bitty traumas that occur over time. So, if a lot of you have been working from home lately, this may look more familiar to you at this point, this poor, ergonomic workstation that you have at home on your couch. Or, maybe you've seen this picture, before. Oh, everybody just looking at their phone rather than visiting with each other. We're hunched over. You've probably heard it said that sitting is the new smoking, and most experts agree that modern life is just tragically sedentary. We spend way too much time sitting. Those experts tell us we actually spend the majority of our waking lives sitting. We average 8 to 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, sitting. That's not how we were designed. We were not designed to sit that much. And this, obviously directly correlates with, increased obesity, increased diabetes, heart disease, and just a shorter, sicker life, just like smoking causes. And to make matters worse, not only are we spending more time sitting, we're spending more time sitting staring at a screen. And so, if sitting is the new smoking, screens are the new crack, right? I mean, it's just, I don't know how else to phrase it other than that. It's that dopamine release, that drug release, and we're getting it from these screens. It's rewiring our brains. We did a presentation back at the beginning of COVID when we were kind of all locked down on digital dementia. And if you missed that, go back and recheck that out. There's some scary information on what it's doing to our kids' brain. But even as adults, it does some of the similar stuff to our brains. So, not only we're sedentary, we're now addicted to our screens or our crack, right? And then not only that, but we're looking down more. And so, the head weighs about 8 to 10 pounds, or 10 to 12 pounds, excuse me. When we're in good posture, our body can tolerate that pretty well. We start leaning forward, and that mechanical force keeps going up. And so before long, by the time we're looking down at our phone, instead of this 10-pound head, we now have a 50-pound head. And that creates a lot more tension, a lot more stress, a lot more irritation, and then gets back to that subluxation, which, if you kind of think of it like a breaker box, you flip that breaker off, that wherever that wire's going, it isn't going to work right? The lights in that section aren't going to work. Well, that's the same thing. It's the exact same thing that happens in our body. This is why it's so important to make sure that all those switches are flipped on and that they're working right. And how do you know if you're subluxated? Well, unfortunately, a lot of times there may not be a lot of symptoms with it. Maybe a little loss of range of motion, but loss of range of motion doesn't really hurt. You don't notice it until you try to look in your rearview mirror or look out your blind spot, and you're like, oh, I can't turn my head quite as far. Oh, well, I'll just turn my body, right? Because we learn to adapt. That's not a good thing. And so, in our office, we use a lot of things to figure out whether somebody is subluxated or misaligned or not moving correctly. We measure their range of motion, obviously. We feel their range of motion. We look at their posture. We do orthopedic tests. We do a lot of new technology in the office, right? So you guys that have been in the office know, I'm a guy. I like my tools, right? So we use a lot of cutting-edge information. And then we start the adjustments. We start trying to get the body to recover. We start removing that interference to the body so that the body can operate the way that it's designed to operate. So, all I can tell you is get checked. If you haven't been checked, get in here. If you have family members that haven't been checked, do the loving thing, get them in here. It may actually change their life for the positive, right? It's a terrible side effect to be able to be healthier, to have more energy, to feel better. Those are good things. And so this leads to my final reason that I think we're in a health crisis, and it's procrastination. We are very good at putting things off, especially when it comes to our health. Oh, I'll deal with that later. I'll address this later. I don't have time right now. I don't have the energy right now. And it's just this perpetual cycle. When we get out of shape, we don't have the energy. We don't want to go to the gym to get in shape because we don't have the energy. So we don't go to the gym. So we don't have the, and so it's kind of this, like I said, it's just this ongoing cycle. We don't have the energy to cook a healthy meal, to eat a healthy thing. So we just grab the candy bar, right? And then all of a sudden we get a little energy spike, and then we plummet and we feel like crud again. So then we go get more sugar. That we hear these signals, right? And we know what to do about it, but yet we don't do it, and that's the procrastination point. So again, like I said, my purpose for doing this class is to try to change our trajectory, to change us out of this health crisis. And like I said, I think there's 3 primary reasons for it. We have this very poor definition of health to begin with. We don't know what health is, and most of what we think is health is really just sickness, surgeries and drugs to cover up what our body's trying to tell us. The second reason we're in a health crisis is personal responsibility. We don't, honestly, we just don't take enough personal responsibility to get ourselves in better health. And the third reason is procrastination. So, if this is you, which again, I think if you made it this far in the class, this probably isn't you, but you probably have some family members that need some coaching, maybe and some dragging and some pulling and maybe some pushing, to get them to that point of, you can only do so much, right? Like, it's not your job to fix them, but maybe bring them to the next class or tell them about our next class. And it's kind of like the youth pastor at the church, right? The parents bring the kids and hand them off to the youth pastor and say, fix them, right? Well, I kind of feel like that's my job sometimes. I'll do my best is all I can ever tell somebody, right? But don't put it off, and like I said, get your family, get them checked, get them healthy. So one of the things, I always say is, make sure we always do free consultations. So, to find out, and I'll tell you whether I think I can help somebody or not. So take advantage of that. The other thing I'm going to say is we're going to start trying to bring these classes back, and hopefully in live audiences and things. And so if you guys would, start thinking about what are some classes you want to learn about, some things you would like to hear more about as we start moving into this year. So I want to thank you guys for your time. I tried to fly through a lot of information as quickly as I could. I hope everybody got something from it. So again, thank you. God bless. Have a great evening.